Alrighty, in the spirit of respecting your time, we're going to get going here, even if we have a couple people coming in on two wheels. Good afternoon and welcome to our second meeting of the Interim Study Committee on House Bill 1229, examining school meals programs. I am Representative Sue Mullen. I represent the town of Bedford and have been given the duty of chairing this committee. With us today are Representative Steve Woodcock, Representative Arthur Ellison, Representative Oliver Ford, and Representative Ralph Boehm. I'm going to sort of just jump right into what our task is today. Last week, we had the pleasure of hearing from some of our constituent groups, and it spurred a discussion that generated more questions than answers from the DOE. So if I could invite Melissa and Kelly to come forward and identify yourselves, we're going to jump right in. And you guys can get on with your day. Speaking of Representative Hall, that's what I always used to do with the kids in my classroom, Muriel. So last week, I shared with the Department of Education the list of questions that we generated during our last meeting. And they included things like questions about the number of students who qualify for free and reduced meals, poverty statistics by community and school, whether or not any Arpa funds were used for the meals program, charter school participation, the actual cost to school districts after state or federal reimbursement, and whether or not the department has a position on the direct Medicaid certification program, what the who the 30 school districts are that don't provide breakfast, and if you folks would be willing to give us an explanation of how the summer meals program works, then that would be greatly appreciated as well. Introduce yourselves for us and take it away.
Does it have to be read? Okay, sorry. Yeah. Melissa White, Division Director for Learner Support from the Department of Ed. And Kelly Rambo, Administrator for Nutrition Programs and Services at the Department of Education. Okay, so I'll start with, I have just taken all of your questions and kind of put them into a document for myself. And then what you have in the packet in front of you is some of the detailed information and data from along with those questions.
Terrific.
So the first question that we had was schools that do not have a breakfast program. So in your packet, you'll find a documentation that says breakfast 21-22. And this, on the right side, you will see zeros and ones. So it's sorted by that. All of those that are zero are those that do not participate in the breakfast program for this current year, and all those that are one, which would be the rest of the document, are those that participate.
Terrific, thank you.
And so the organizational name is the SAU, and then you can see each specific school is the site name that goes along with that. And just so that you understand this, it kind of goes along with the question that was I believe the last question, and explain why New Hampshire ranks number 47 in the National School Lunch Program. So this document obviously shows that we have a great deal of those that are participating for 21-22, and that is due to the free meals. So normally, pre-COVID, there has been a struggle for New Hampshire schools to be able to serve a breakfast program. And some of those struggles or factors that might contribute to that would be staffing, and that would be inclusive of wages. Are they part-time? Are they full-time? If they're full-time, then obviously insurance comes with that. And lunch is obviously the bigger time that you would need people in. So that's also taken consideration. Equipment, do you have the right equipment to be able to run a breakfast program? And that would be, are you serving in the hallway? Is it a grab and go? Do you need kiosks? So there's all those things to think about for that program for breakfast. Scheduling of the school day. The school day is obviously the schedule is already in place. And then that goes along with bus schedules. Is there enough time in the morning for those students to get off the bus, get in and get a breakfast? And so all of those things that are to take into consideration are actually at the local level. That's not something that the Department of Education determines.
Kelly, can I ask a question about the list?
Sure.
Does this list include public charter and privates that are participating in the food program?
Yep. This list is everyone that we have at the Department of Education that would or would not participate in the program.
Terrific, thank you. My follow-up question is, I can't help but notice that the first three non-breakfast participants are the three elementary schools in Bedford. I also know that the intermediate, the middle, and the high school do participate in the breakfast program. How common is that?
It could be more common, again, with staffing, depending on where your staffing is at the school could be a factor, like stated before, that if you serve more meals at the high school than you would at the elementary school, then you have that staff in to be able to serve that. Mm-hmm. The time frame also in the morning might be different for grab and go. At the middle school, at the high school, they can handle a grab and go situation, whereas the elementary school, they might need a little bit more guidance. And also the staffing piece too is not only the nutrition department staff, but the school staff needs someone in there to be able to monitor if they're eating in the cafeteria. You need to have a monitor in there too. So there's a lot of factors that go into when thinking about running a breakfast program.
Representative Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. If we were to back up this first chart, the breakfast 2021 to 22, like 3 years before we got into, eligibility, everybody's eligible, would these look the same? I mean,
I can get that information for you for our next meeting.
Okay.
I can pull the same report for let's say 18, 19. That's
Yeah.
kind of our year that we're looking at.
that would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Representative Woodcock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kelly, thank you for taking this question. There's a personal question in terms of vested interest. I don't see either of the charter schools from the Conway area in your listing, period. So would that mean they did not apply or they were not eligible? One of those?
They might not run a meal program through
all.
our program at all.
Okay, so there could be then more than 30. We just don't know who they are.
That would be correct, yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Vaughn.
Yeah, just a question on what are we doing here? The purpose of this meeting was to see if we approve an interim study for this, and looks like we are doing what the committee is supposed to be doing, that we are going to say bring forth next year or not. We're doing the committee's work that we're going to propose happen. So I think this is going way overboard of what we're doing.
Actually, Representative Bohm, if you go back to the discussion of this interim study that we had when we met as a full committee, I raised that issue to Chairman Ladd, and Chairman Ladd jokingly said that he was going to make me the chair of the committee because he saw this as a good opportunity for us to discuss the issue as it related to all of the food bills. So I understand that, and I made a joke about it and said, we're having a committee to decide whether or not we're having a committee. And he suggested that we do the work anyhow.
Yeah, but the thing is, it looks like, the members of the committee were going to recommend we have it anyway. So aren't we just pretty much wasting our time? We're going to bring this bill forward next year anyway. So to establish the committee, we are not establishing a committee. This is an interim study to see if we should establish a committee. We're doing all that committee's work here.
Thank you for your feedback.
Well, just clarification from the chair, that the Representative Bohm is certainly right in referencing one of the bills that we have. We have four others which deal with various breakfast programs or various feeding programs, and it looks to me like that's sort of what we're supposed to study. So it doesn't appear to me that we're limited to one of the five bills that was presented to us.
We had a lengthy discussion around the farm to school bill. And when we were in respectful debate over that farm to school bill, that was the first opportunity that Representative Ladd took to marrying all of the food bills, if you will, into a collective discussion. I believe he saw it, Representative Bohm, as being an efficient way of looking at the topic and sort of doing a lot of the preliminary work ahead of next session. Representative Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And actually, I can just comment on that, right? Okay. Yeah, I signed up for this committee to become informed. So I think becoming informed is not a waste of time. And I would go along with what you're saying. That's all the bills, all food stuff. Let's get informed and move forward. Thank you.
The good news, Representative Bohm, is that I have promised that these meetings will be succinct, to the point, and that we will not labor here into the wee hours.
Well, just one point too. I mean, we're doing all this work, not knowing who will even be here next year to have to hear all this information all over again, is one of my points.
There's truth in that. There's truth in that. Okay, Kelly, continue. Melissa, whatever direction you're going in, please continue.
Okay, thank you. So the next question we had was the startup cost to run a breakfast, and that is determined at the local level. That's not something that we can determine at the state level for that. To the other factors that I spoke about, they're individualized to each SAU. That would be staffing, equipment, schedule of the day, bus schedules, et cetera. So those are the things that would be determined for that. So unfortunately, that's at a local level. The number of students who qualify for free and reduced meals, in your packet, you're going to find that we have printed out for you some aggregate data for that. If you go behind the National School Lunch Program one, these are landscape, and there should be data from 18-19, 19-20, 20-21, and 21-22. And the reason for looking at those is 18-19, like I said before, is our kind of our target that is pre-COVID that we've been using. And then moving forward, we know that 19-20 was the start of COVID, and 20-21 and 21-22 are when meals have been free for those. So I just wanted you to have all of that data to be able to compare to.
And just to add to that, we did see about a 25% reduction in families filling out the free and reduced forms compared to before the pandemic versus after the pandemic, when those meals became free. For all.
Does anybody have any questions for the department at this point? Great, continue.
Okay. Thank you. And so the nutrition standards were another question that were raised. So also in your packets, you will see that right behind those, the National School Lunch Meal Program standards are in there. Also, the breakfast programs are right behind that. Then following that are the sodium targets. And there is, and I know this might be a little much and confusing to look at, but I just wanted you to have all the information in front of you. The one behind that is whether you run a 3-day, 4-day, or 5-day program at your school. And the one last one behind that is the newest from the USDA. They're the Transitional Standards. And those are going to be for milk, whole grains, and the sodium final rule on that.
Can I ask you a question on that one? So did you, have you seen the bill from last session on nutritional standards that was talking about sodium levels and whole grains and?
Yes.
I mean, it was estimated that it was going to require 6 additional staff members at the department to administer the reduction of sodium levels. And how do the standards that are currently in place stack up next to what was being proposed?
Unfortunately for both of us, we were not here during that TA that was given. So if we could come back to the answer for that question.
Okay, it was House Bill 1561.
I just want to make sure I understand it and answer appropriately.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that you know which bill I'm referencing. It was House Bill 1561.
Thank you.
There was an amendment to it. All of these bills were ultimately found inexpedient to legislate, but I think that, a lot of the reason that these bills were scuttled was because of the price tag that was associated with it. So I'm just curious as to the standards that they were proposing, what has happened in the interim? How do they stack up next to what you're already doing? And, would it actually cost $445,000 to lower sodium standards and increase whole grains or whatever? There's a financial note on that bill, so when you look at it, you'll see what they estimated as the cost.
Okay. Thank you, and we will get back to you on that one.
Perfect. Representative Woodcock.
Thank you. A question for my own edification, on the one that dealt with the calculations for the USDA. Did you have it going? Thank you. I think you may have explained this the other day when I was not here, so maybe I apologize for my not being here. The 3, 4, 6 day sequence, I don't understand that.
It's a confusing, kind of confusing document. So there might be schools that only operate 3 days a week. And keep in mind, this is a USDA document, so it's more for the whole state of the United States. So
Kelly, can you just tell me which one you're looking at?
yes, so it looks like this one. It's a stapled page and it says short and long.
Legal calculations, yeah.
Okay. So here in New Hampshire, we follow this would be for, let's say if you had a residential or non-residential location that you were serving for and the students would live there or stay there, you would operate 6 days a week or you'd operate 7 days a week. So this is kind of the unusual norm if you didn't run a 5-day-a-week program. I just wanted you to have this documentation.
Okay.
And I apologize if it
Oh, no,
was more
actually,
confusing.
that's my, well, thank you so much for clarifying that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is there no 5-day schedule?
So the normal 5-day schedule is the single page that is in front of you. That is just, and I probably should have left that out. Maybe less is more on that. So the 5-day schedule are the 2 single pages that you have, and that would be for lunch and then the separate one for breakfast.
Representative Ellison.
Not necessarily on this particular chart. Is it okay to ask a question?
Yeah, let me just see if I can save these guys from us playing Pac-Man with the information here. Does anybody have any questions about the 5-day schedule and the foods that are being required, offered? Okay, Representative Ellison, you're on.
Thank you. Sort of shifting over to, once again, the participation rates. The Food Research and Action Center lists New Hampshire as 50th in terms of participation. When you look at the number of students who are in the lunch program versus or part of the breakfast program. And they list us at 38% or 37%, something like that. It's hard, as you know, to kind of find comparable states. But I pulled Maine and Vermont. Maine is at 57%, Vermont's at 61% in terms of participation rate. Any thoughts on your part about why there's this differential in terms of more students being served breakfast who are eligible in those 2 states than in New Hampshire?
Like I stated before, for breakfast, there's a number of factors that could contribute to that. I can't speak directly because it is a local level decision, unfortunately. And we have seen with obviously in the data you can see in front of you with the availability of free meals, there is an increase in that participation. So those are all things to take into consideration on that. As far as the aggregate data that we have, to Melissa's point previously, we have seen a decrease in families filling out the application. So I know there is a big concern for that, obviously, next year as the meals do revert back to, and the waivers that are currently in place expire on June 30th.
Excuse me, follow up? Then in looking at this data once again, and I understand the explanation, are you in a position to be dealing with these other states, saying, what are you doing, we're not doing? Because I assume that they deal with the same issues around fewer people filling out the applications. I assume they deal with local school budgets and money. I mean, what do they do that we're not doing? I guess that's my question.
I think that would be, reasonable for us to reach out to gather more information from the other states to see if there's, if there's something specific, if there's funding that they provide to the schools specifically for this purpose. So yes, we can definitely research that with our neighboring states, and then also we'll look at other states that are comparable to us, like the Dakotas and Montana. We tend to look at them because even though they're very large states, they tend to have a very small population like we do.
That'd be great. I'd be very interested in whatever you could come up with.
Great.
Yeah, in some of the reading that I've done, I don't think New Hampshire is the only state that has struggled with outreach. I think this is probably a golden opportunity time, this transition back into sort of our new normal from the pandemic, into looking at, what kinds of things are other states doing, if they are, or, is New Hampshire in a position to be sort of a trailblazer on how to get to as many of those kids' families as we can? Because my fear is that because we've now had years of free meals for everybody, that parents are going to be under the assumption that they don't have to fill out paperwork. And then you find out that you do have to fill out the paperwork. And by the time you fill the paperwork out, you've missed the deadlines. And, there's all kinds of complications out there. So I would think that we would want to at least consider those things.
Thank you.
How about ARPA funds? Has the school lunch program received ARPA funds, utilized ARPA funds? Are you on the radar?
So the schools are eligible to use their ARPA funds for this purpose. It's considered an allowable use of funds, but because the meals are free, and the funding is already there, they're choosing then to use the ARPA funds for other purposes as opposed to using it for this particular program since it's already paid for.
Yeah, I was thinking more along the lines of that public relations piece of getting applications into the hands of every family that's eligible, you know, that kind of thing, more so than paying for the meals. Just a thought,
Increasing the outreach.
yeah.
I mean, that is definitely considered an allowable use of funds. They could use the funds for that.
Other questions? Summer meals.
So summer meals, just like the past 2 years, have fallen into the free or meals at no cost. So this year will be the first year that we're reverting back to what we call, and we have a lot of acronyms, so bear with me. So we have SFSP, which is Summer Food Service Program. We also have Seamless Summer Option, which is SSO, which is currently what every school is running now in New Hampshire for the free program. That's just how the USDA is categorizing that as far as funding is concerned for them. And we also have what's called Extended Nutrition Service Lunch Program. So that would be if a school doesn't qualify for those other two programs, they do still have the opportunity to, every school has an opportunity to run a meal program. However, it would be an extension of what they do during the school year, meaning that meals could be free, reduced, paid, and applications would be needed for eligibility. Whereas the other two, there's aggregate data that USDA uses to categorize those that might fall into it for their eligibility for that.
Representative Woodcock.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. On the SSO program, yeah. Towns and cities that use recreation departments and those facilities, that's where that money comes from, that program? Provide meals?
So those would be considered camps. So summer is a very complex program when it's broken down. We have sponsors that would sponsor maybe a program that couldn't do it itself. So we have a great number of sponsors in New Hampshire that pick up let's say the administration for those programs, and then so those would fall under that kind of program. So they might have a sponsorship to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions? Do you have any questions of us, or would you just like to continue?
Nope, I think we're
Okay.
good.
All right.
So charter school participation, if you turn in your packet to National School Lunch Program Sites 21, 22, those are all of our current sites that participate in the National School Lunch Program, whether it be breakfast or lunch. So it's different than the breakfast one.
Kelly, do you offhand know how many charter schools are participating?
I believe it is on the back, last page. It's 6 public charter schools and 8 private schools.
Okay. Representative.
They selected not to choose
That's correct.
for whatever reason.
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
And just a note also, this is not the total number of public schools. That's obviously individual schools and not SAUs. That's why it's that number.
without looking at this and not expecting you really to have the answer to this, but of those charters that are participating, do they tend to be more urban than rural, or evenly split, rural than urban?
That is something that, unfortunately, due to my newness in the department, I don't know that off the top of my hand, but I can find that information.
We frequently ask questions that you should not know the answer to off the top of your head, so don't take that as any kind of expectation. So there is no requirement for any school district to participate in the National Food Program.
You mean in order to run a school?
Yeah,
That is correct.
so they can privatize it, they can offer no food program whatsoever?
Yes, that is correct.
Is that, yeah?
London program, when nobody was eating the food that the government said you had to make.
So,
Very pulled out and running their own.
well, that was my question, Ralph. Can you speak a little bit about that? Do you know anything about how they're going about that?
I don't know how they're doing it, but they decided that they weren't gonna, because the food that the government said, hey, this is what you have to make, the lunches you have to provide, were getting thrown away. And that's one of the things we gotta look at when we say, hey, this is the food we can eat. Will the kids eat it?
Right.
And that's one of the problems we have. So London, I don't know how they're doing, they're offering lunches.
Right,
And maybe even breakfast also, it's a pretty big school district,
right.
but they're not, they don't go with the federal program. I don't know if any of them. That's one of the things we're all gonna look at when we look at school lunches, what will the kids eat?
Right,
I
right.
mean, the biggest, when I was on the school board.
Hey, Ralph, will you,
Oh, I'm sorry. And when I was on the school board in Litchfield, one of the problems with what was happening is before they came up with what you have to, the biggest money maker that the student-run shop had was selling French fries at lunchtime. Because the lunch program wasn't. But then they sort of stopped it but that was the students running, they sell other things, school supplies and whatnot, but they were selling French fries at lunchtime, and that's what their biggest money maker. So the thing is, we gotta be careful of what we say kids have to eat because they're not going to eat it.
Representative Woodcock?
Thank you. Just a clarification, if I may, for Dealey. On the National School Lunch Program site, the document you provided, I'm just listening to Representative Vaughn. I'm looking at page 2 and I see that the 5 or 6 Londonderry schools participate now, at least 2021. So does that mean they have to follow the regulations of the, okay, so that information is actually a little dated.
Perhaps they weren't participating in the past, but now they are.
Okay, but if they participate now, they have to follow the guidelines. Okay, thank you.
So the next question that I have on here is the participation rate from last year that school districts use applications from parents for program eligibility. And unfortunately, since for the last 2 years, meals have been free, applications did not need to be collected for that. So that's kind of where the lack of data for that particular thing is. We touched upon the breakfast, and we did summer programs. I feel like there was one that I was missing. Yep, I think that we got them all.
I'm very impressed. I last week when I asked for questions from members of our committee, I said to them, you've got like 10 minutes to get me these questions, because I don't know how these guys are going to be able to pull all this information together in 2 work days, but well done. Well done. Other questions, Representative Ellison?
This is probably maybe to Oliver, but you might comment on this. Oliver just did a survey, got a survey on homeschooling, which has a whole lot of comments about I participate, I won't, the government can't touch the food, or I really like it, the school drops off food for my kids once a week. What's your sense, Oliver, what the requirement is around homeschooling, or the opportunity is around homeschooling for participating?
I know no more than you know, because that chart is what I got in response to my query.
Okay.
And so we can all interpret it together, which is why I copied it to everyone, because I was flabbergasted. I started from the standpoint of the one thing that was missing to me as a person who used to do a lot of research in various things, was no one was talking about efficacy. They were only talking about, do you do it or don't you do it? And I wanted to know how much difference it made when students had breakfast, how much made when they had dinner. So I turned to my in-house expert, my wife, and she's the former state director of special ed and has a long history of teaching in those. And she tells me exactly what some of you were saying the other day, that she took it out of her own pocket, provided food for the students getting off the bus so they would have enough in their stomach to be able to study. And she said it's not uncommon. And sure enough, in those things, you get tales of people, teachers, taking money out of their pocket and buying food for the students, whether it's a special ed teacher or just a classroom teacher. And so I'm beginning to think, I said, yes, there's a felt need, but where's the data on the difference it makes? And I was astounded not to find any. So I called to Dr. Erin Sharp at UNH, who's the Associate Dean of Health and Human Services. And I've asked her for a study list for us. I've asked her for materials on research having to do with school meals and what there is about performance. Has anyone done a pre and a post test on this to say how much difference it does make? Because I thought that part is missing from the data. And so I was sort of surprised that nowhere in what you were sent was there any question like that. We're just doing it because we assume it's better. Well, yeah, if I were hungry, I'd assume that too, but it's nice if you do a study, if you cover your bases. And I think if we had, the more data we have, the better case we're going to be able to build for doing whatever is best for the students. So that's how I got into this business of doing that.
Madam Chair?
Representative Ellison.
Back to the homeschooling thing, would I be correct then in saying that homeschool students are eligible or are participating in the food program based on a local option, based on what local school districts want to do or not do? Would I be correct with that assumption?
Just to clarify, for during COVID purposes, there were some districts that had the capability to deliver meals home. So I don't want there to be a confusion in that respect. So there was that capability running this particular program that you get into an open site school where they have the capability to be able to do that. But I'll let Melissa speak to the homeschool part.
With regards to homeschool students, they would have the ability to participate. The homeschool students do have the ability to participate in a lot of programs. So, for example, you can have an instance where a student might come in and take a few classes, or they might be part of the team, a team or some sort of activity or athletic activity. And so this would qualify under that. Like if the parents sought out that resource, they would not be denied.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up to that, Melissa? Sure. So what if the child is not dually enrolled? If they're a full homeschool student but they're eligible, they meet the criteria for free and reduced lunch. I mean, I'm not talking COVID, I'm talking either pre or post-COVID. Would that homeschool family be eligible for meals if the child was fully homeschooled?
Yes, they would be eligible. I just haven't heard of any specific cases, and I could go back and try to gather some more information. I have not heard of a specific case where any homeschool families are choosing to access the school meals, but I know that they would still be eligible to receive the meals.
Okay, maybe we'll send you the information that Representative Ford received, because it looked like there were responses where people were saying, yes, I'm taking advantage of it. So it'll be interesting to see if it was just as a result of COVID. How does that play out once the COVID meals program ends? Representative Vaughn.
Yeah, also too, on other programs, there's problem, a lot of individual school districts have different programs for different things, and it's kind of hard to collect that data. One of the good examples is Salem CTE, which is in Salem High School, so it makes it easier. Their culinary arts program creates food boxes for kids on Friday to take home for their weekends. So, I mean, there, like I said, there's all kind of different things going around, and it's up to different school districts. And the first part of it with this, how do we know that having people not having good breakfast don't do good in school and blah, blah, blah. That's kind of impossible to really look at. I mean, you ask most families to say, do your kids eat breakfast? Most are going to say yes. They don't want to be accused of not taking care of their kids. So those questions, those kind of statistics are kind of hard to come up with. I mean, when I was in high school, I very seldom ate breakfast. I very seldom eat breakfast now. I mean, I don't, my body doesn't like breakfast. But I mean, yeah, but I do okay. But anyway, so it depends. And most parents, because I mean, they're not going to answer, no, I'm abusing my kid by not feeding them. I mean, that's why the statistics like that, I think, would be impossible to get.
I just would like to add, if it's okay, schools are eligible to use their McKinney-Vento funds. McKinney-Vento funds are for addressing the needs of homeless students, and so they are allowed to utilize those funds specifically to send home meal packages for the weekends and that type of thing. So schools can use, it's not necessarily connected to food and nutrition, but they do, each of the school districts do receive money for those students.
Representative Ellison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess a request to someone, and I'm not sure who it goes to at this point, but I've seen lots and lots of research about academic success and lack of nutrition, and I think the committee, we need to have that. I don't know whether that's a Jen question or it's a question here or it's a question here, but I know that's out there.
If you, New Hampshire Hunger Solutions last week provided us with that information packet, and the last two articles are briefs that provide copious amounts of research citations. So, I mean, I'm sure we could make a specific request for follow-up articles that they think might be germane, but there certainly is a boatload of citations in the material that they gave us.
Thank you.
Representative Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In partial response to my colleague's comments here, one of the sources you might not think of for this kind of information, because I admit parents do not want to admit this, and I can't blame them. But the school nurse is often the person to whom the children are referred, and they keep records of what they did for the child and so forth. And so it would be able to infer quite logically, I think, from that kind of data that nutrition and sustenance was a cause factor, at least, or somewhere a factor in performance. And then you could correlate that with academic performance and begin to make a reasonable assessment that there was a connection there.
Yeah, I would guess that that's done. I mean, I certainly remember from my pre-retirement days that the statistics on feeding kids before they took exams was huge. That were they saw real spikes in improvement when kids ate before they had to sit and take any kind of a standardized test.
Yeah.
So so I would think that that is a valid point, Representative Ford, and that data is out there.
Yeah.
Representative Woodcock.
As well as discipline beyond the academic piece, there's data that reflects on discipline for performance by youngsters as well that eat meals.
More to share, or
Any questions for us?
we have them? I think probably we go on recess, as you well know, during the months of July and August. So our next meeting is going to be in September. So you folks are going to have plenty of time to knock around the things that we've talked about. And I would also ask my colleagues on the committee, again, as I did last week, if you have questions or particular points that you would like to stress with Kelly and Melissa, if you want to funnel them through me so that they're getting them from one person, that would probably be helpful. You notice that we haven't gotten to the point yet where we're saying, well, what would you recommend? That's coming. So don't go anywhere in September. All right, thank you very much to
Thank
the
you.
department for all of your work. Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to speak to anything that they've heard today? Yes, the American Heart Association.
Now it's on, right? Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Vaughn, Government Relations Director for the American Heart Association in New Hampshire. We were involved with Representative Bertie Duche on coming up with at least one of the bills that he had filed, 1561. I do not work at the federal level, but we do have a staff within the American Heart Association that works directly with the USDA and other organizations and are very much a stakeholder at the table around school nutrition standards. So what the representative wanted to do was put forward a bill to help improve the nutrition standards of school meals. And, we took a look at how far back it had been since New Hampshire had updated state-based standards, which, again, were very much connected with the USDA food standards. And it had been a while. It was actually before the 2012 update to the federal nutrition standards for schools. Back in 2012, it was the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act that was the impetus for the federal nutrition standards. And from that point forward, schools were to follow a set of standards, and we found 99% of schools were able to follow the standards that had been set. There were other standards coming along for the future. There was some other updates around the competitive foods because they didn't want the competitive foods to be competing with the nutrition standards of the school meal. So that was elevated as well, and schools were able to meet those as well. Starting, I think it was back in 2017, there were some rollbacks at the federal level. So like the sodium standards that were discussed a little bit before, there were standards that were set with the intention that you wouldn't just have an immediate move to what would be the optimum sodium for children to be taking in. They wanted to do a stepwise. So there was target 1, then target 2, which hadn't been put into play yet, a target 3, and then even a target 4, which leaves it to the states to also put together a plan. So this was all built into 1561, but with a little more progressive than what the federal was putting out for schools. At the same time, looking at these, we realized there were many other issues at play, particularly with the COVID epidemic and the fact that there were, products that just weren't available to schools that had been before, those supply chain issues. So we wanted to make sure there was some leeway in that legislation to make sure those waivers would be allowed for that as well. Unfortunately, from the writing of the bill and moving forward, things got worse than get better. And there are the other issues that the department had just outlined, which is also, the staffing and equipment. There were some grants that were given to schools to do equipment to really be able to follow those school nutrition standards. So, it's not just setting the standards. I believe it's also looking at the funding for communities to be able to put this into play. I really appreciate your, looking at this issue, not just as, should we do a study, but looking into what the issues are. Across the board. We also would support, a farm to school program where, because obviously the main part of nutrition for kids and adults are those fruits and vegetables that none of us are getting enough of, quite frankly. But for children, it is really important that they do. There is food security, but the American Heart Association also is framing it as nutrition security. And before, we all leave today, I do have some handouts for you on some of the information from the American Heart Association on all of that, which you can look at. And if you have questions from that, I'm more than happy to help fill in some of the gaps in knowledge that we might have at this point. We were also just talking about studies, and the American Heart Association does a lot of, according to studies, there is a connection between what children eat, not just the amount of food, but the nutritional level of that food and academic performance. I don't happen to have with me even a reference to what those studies are, so I'm glad we have the summer to provide you with some more information, because there is a connection that's made, but we don't want to just have it be they say. You need to have some of those studies in front of you. We're still very interested in working with New Hampshire, as well as my colleagues in other states, on the nutrition standards for schools. What we were looking at is the federal level sets the standards that schools need to follow if they are part of the lunch and or breakfast program. What we would love to say, because as we know, there are very slow movement at the federal level on things. And what we just saw of the rollback of these standards, of the implementation of these standards, is only going to hurt children. And, it's really those children who are the eligible for free and reduced, the low income, food security, marginalized families that we are very concerned with as well. We also very much support moving to a healthy school meals for all. It's also referred to as universal school meals. It's what we've just experienced over the past couple of years, and the point of that is multiple reasons why parents would not have to fill out the materials, the information for the free and reduced. All children would be able to participate in the school meals program, so it would take away the stigma. It would also provide more stable revenue for school food service programs, which is also very, very important, as we know. Going forward, there might still continue to be some food supply chain issues. The people who are out there ready to fill jobs at schools, excuse me, may or may not be, increasing at the rate that we'd like to see. So there's just a lot, but we really need to move in a direction where we are providing, as much nutrition to students as they can. From our standpoint, it's a health standpoint. We see children with, still have high obesity levels, children who are showing pre-diabetes, if not diabetes. There are so many children who are taking in far too much sodium in their diets. And, when we talk about the taste of foods, this is an acquired taste that we all have for foods that are high in sodium, high in sugar. We may not even know that some of these foods contain sodium. It doesn't taste salty, but it's in there. And from the food industry perspective, this is the cheaper way of creating food, is using things like salt products for preservatives and flavor.
Can I ask you a question,
Yeah.
Nancy? Am I understanding this correctly then, that what you were trying to do was to look at returning the standards to the pre-2017 level?
It's not so much that, because those standards hadn't necessarily been the rollbacks were for the continuation of the steps to get school nutrition up to the par of the dietary guidelines for health for Americans, and basically those scientific standards based around children and what their nutrients should be. The focus for the bill was really sodium, whole grain, and we also put in sugar, which is not added. Sugar is not addressed at the federal level on school meals. So
Yeah, the reason I was asking that question is because I just said to Kelly and Melissa, can you figure out where, in terms of the standards that were being proposed by the bill and where we are now, can you figure out where there's a discrepancy?
Yep.
But you may already have the answer.
And it really is, it's moving on from the sodium level 1 to the sodium level 2, which in the bill that Representative Deshays had, we were looking at that starting in the school year 23-24. So looking now, obviously, I think it was February, it was announced that the federal government was going back to putting in those transitional standards to get schools, giving the schools 2 years to get, to the point where they're able to decrease the sodium in school foods, and, make sure that the industry is able to supply those foods, because now they know they need to have those available. So.
Great, thank you so much. Other questions? Okay, we're good, thank you very much. And yes, we'll take whatever you have to hand out to us, this group that likes to read.
And we can supply you with a lot more than that, so trying to be cognizant of that, not putting too much on you all at once. But
Right.
So there's more information in here than you probably need for school meals, but it's all part of
It's all right,
from
if
nutrition
it
standards.
keeps somebody alive, we'll take it. I have one more question for the DOE, if you don't, Kelly, did you just say no? You're not answering my question? I meant to ask you about Medicaid direct certification and what you know about what's happening in other states. And last time around, we were talking about the fact that, we had looked at Medicaid direct certification, and there were some concerns raised about security of data. And so I'm just wondering where the department is in all of that.
So currently, the department really doesn't take a stance on this. It's really up to the legislature, and then we will follow through with the decision made by the legislature. Currently, right now, the federal government has rolled out the pilot program to allow those kids that are on Medicaid to qualify for free and reduced lunch automatically. So we would have the option to apply. I believe the application is due in September. So at this point, New Hampshire couldn't participate because there's not enough time to put together all of the materials we would need to apply for that program. So it'd be something we would be looking at for the following year.
Yeah.
But the states that are participating in that, it's because they've gone through and applied for that program. And then were approved to participate within that program with the federal government. The data security piece of it, when we're looking at doing, we currently have an MOU with DHHS right now. And so there's no exchange of data that's happening. They are providing us information that's done at the local level as far as the town and then perhaps like a student name. And then we are manually going in and matching that within our own student information system so we can look at, okay, so Melissa White is located in this town. This is a student that is on Medicaid. And then we would match that up to see if that is a student that is, on that roster. And then therefore that student would automatically qualify. This is how it would work. So the data exchange piece, there's nothing we are sending to DHHS. It's information that they are providing to us. And then we would not be releasing that information out. So
Is
there's no
there
change.
already a process for the exchange of information? That's what you're talking about when you
Yes.
say that there's a memorandum of understanding between DHHS and DOE?
Yes.
Okay, so the process of exchanging information is already happening. To your
Yes.
knowledge, have there been data breaches or any complication from the exchange?
And this is for students for SNAP benefits, TANF, and I believe WIC. And those are all federally required. So that's why we do that exchange.
Excellent, thank you. I'm so happy I remembered to ask you the question. I think it was on my list somewhere, but I had so many lists going that I may have forgotten to send it to you.
Thank you.
Other questions before the DOE for real goes back to work? Oh, all right, thank
That's
you.
good. I get my.
Thank you. Okay, so what's the committee got on their mind? Anything? As I mentioned, we're obviously recessed for July and August, so I think that we would be looking at our next meeting somewhere the week of September 12th. I will have to coordinate that with our master scheduler to make sure that we've got space available. And if any of you have time in September that you are unavailable, if you would let me know, that would be great, because
The 13th.
yeah, not the 13th. No, I will not. I will not ask you to come in on primary day. But yeah, in fact, it would. We don't have a Dem primary. In all likelihood, we won't meet on the 12th either. We'll wait until after the primary to see whether or not people are still standing. So. But the farm to table people have indicated that they would like to come in and speak. So farm to table, farm to school. I wish it was farm to table, but I'm not in school anymore. So the farm to school people would like to come in. Oliver, I thank you for, Representative Ford, I thank you for that information on homeschoolers. I think we will have some time to digest it. And then maybe have some, even some more questions for the DOE when we get back in September, but
Also, when I get a response from Dean Sharp, I will circulate that among the committee.
certainly that's
That way we
any,
begin to see, do we need to acquire some of that, whatever.
right,
Perhaps even invite her.
right,
And that sort of thing.
yeah.
She did the work.
Will you hit your microphone, Oliver?
She did the work on extending the school day. She was actively involved in that whole process, which is related to breakfast. And so she has some background in that respect, and the function of that study and what she got from it. And so my surmisal is that it'll be all tied into this. This is a multi-part issue, and I think we're going to have to look at all those parts.
Oh, absolutely. If we can just gather enough information to streamline for ourselves
Right.
what we should be studying and what we need to study.
Pass on to the committee that
Yes,
follows.
yes, yes. Thank you. Representative Woodcock?
Your opinion that perhaps this committee, when they're done their work in the fall, are going to promulgate a single inclusive bill?
No, the function of the interim study committee is to either recommend future legislation or not recommend future legislation. But it would be up to individual representatives to craft anything that, that they were bringing forward. That's not the function of this committee.
Okay, thank you.
And regardless of what the output comes, recommend or not recommend, doesn't stop anybody from still putting in a bill.
Right. Yep. Turn myself off. On that note, then, I am going to adjourn this session of interim study on 1229 and wish you all a healthy and happy summer, and we'll see you in September. Thank you very much.